If you've been following the channel, you know that I'm talking mostly about luxury vintage watches like Rolex, Cartier, Omega, and so on. But today I want to talk about different types of watches. They're in a totally different category because people who like them a lot, and those are Seiko divers. I don't usually cover Seikos in general because they operate in a totally different world altogether. They're not luxury watches by the traditional means. You cannot find them in the same stores as you might find a Cartier, a Rolex, or an Omega in. But here's the thing. Seiko divers are really great watches. Seiko in general is a very good watch. And today they have a very massive collector base. And due to their affordability, you can get really good watches at a very good price, and that's where they're placed in the market. Today I'm going to show you the diver watches that I have on hand. I want to talk about their history, their provenance, why they're so important to me, and if you're a collector or you're starting your watch journey, those watches might be considered as a perfect watch altogether. It's not impressive to spend money. It's impressive to actually have someone that took the time and did his due diligence to buy something that doesn't scream money but screams knowledge. Seiko was never considered as a luxury brand, but the quality and the build is always exceptional. You have to understand that everything is made by Seiko, might it be in China or in Japan, because they have both kind of factories, they still have the Japanese standards all together. Obviously, the stuff made in China is a bit lower level, but what is made in Japan, from their cases, their movements, and everything else, is always very good. That's why they have a massive fan base. The people who love Seiko, they love them to the core. And they know the models by heart, which I sadly don't. I know a lot of other models, but Seiko lovers do their best and they know them by heart. They know what's coming up. They know what is going to be next. Seiko still remains affordable for a lot of people, with watches ranging from the low $100 up to the Prospex, the Grand Seiko line, and then the Creditors, which are extremely expensive in certain models. For a lot of people, that affordability meant cheap or meant something that's not going to last a long time. But if you're looking at the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, if you're finding most of their watches, their quartz watches are still working, and everything else is made and built with quality. You have to understand that Seiko never played the Swiss watch industry's game. They are mostly affordable, they are available, and you don't have to play any games with them, except maybe a few limited editions where you might have to know the dealer or play a bit of the game of supporting them a bit more than a regular customer. But altogether, Seiko remains very down to earth, and you can find exceptional pieces for a very good price. I would say that Seiko is the one company that will occupy that one spot in the collection that nothing compares to. And that's why, for me, the Seiko divers are very important. When we're talking about divers, we're talking about the 1965 evolution of Seiko from classic watches to the dive watches. And everything traces down back to 1965 with the 62 MAS, which is a proper professional diver, and its proportions still remain today very important and very up to date with today's market. The 62 MAS was the response of a very high growing demand for divers watches back in the 1960s. What we see is that the design and DNA of that 62 MAS still remains today up to date, and the evolution of the company through the divers watches is still very present to this day. With the evolution of those watches, we still see today the 62 MAS design in a lot of the SPB models, and it's not even nostalgia, it's not even retro, it has nothing to do with that. It's the fact that the watch is just perfect the way it is. It just wears very well on the wrist, and I have a few of them myself. They're really great little watches, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But you cannot compare something like this to other brands that are always trying to do something different. Seiko always did something very good. What we see with the new SPB models and all their reissues of the 62 MAS is that the improvement over the years has been adding to their crystals, to the action of the bezel, and to the movements, and everything is tied up perfectly today. Why are they such good watches? First of all, we have to talk about the movement. The higher end 62 MAS reeditions use the 8L35 movement, and you're gonna see them in the higher end Prospex models that are mostly limited. You're not gonna get them for the cheaper watches, but you can still find them in their higher end models. This is a very nice movement that you have to look for if you have the chance to finding one at the retail price, because a lot of those are worth a bit higher than retail, or a lot higher. The 8L35 is in the same family movement as the entry-level Grand Seikos. Those Seikos become very desirable when they have those movements because they're very highly finished movements. There's no fancy complication to those movements. They're just perfectly executed. They're reliable, serviceable, and they're built to last decades. When we're looking at the case finishes, we have different Zaratsu polishing for higher-end models. That's very important because when you have a company that gives that level of attention to their cases or to a movement or to anything that they manufacture, it shows that the company really respects you and wants to give you the most for your money. They integrate a lot of new technology like ceramic bezels, sapphire crystals with anti-reflecting coating. Everything feels good. Everything feels high quality and not cheap. Seiko never really went with the 62 MAS into different areas or different directions. They kept everything in proportion and they just feel perfect. Also, the design still remains very simple. We can read the dial within a few seconds. We can turn the bezel very well and it clicks we can hear it right here. The efficiency we have and the result we have with those watches is very important because they're tool watches. They're watches that we can use every day without really worrying about the watch. They're quite small, they're easy to wear, and they are functional. They have a 200 or 300 meter water resistance, and they are real tool watches. This is why I considered those for many years as my perfect travel watches. And as a little bonus, they're strap monsters. You can put different straps on them, you can put different NATOs, and I have a big enjoyment wearing those vintage Swiss ultra thin rubber straps from the 1980s. They're ultra comfortable and you forget that you're wearing the watch when you travel with them. You can go to the beach, you can do a lot of stuff with those things, and they're really perfect. Let's see what I have. Let's talk about them and dive in my little collection here. What kind of watches do I like and what kind of watches do I use on my travels? I have three 62 MIS. I have the SPB 143, the SPB 501, and the SPB 253 J1. All of those watches do share the same platform, the same idea, and they're just perfect. What I have here that I just acquired this week is the SPB 501 with the latest 6L55 movement. I'm sorry, plastics are falling off. I can't wait to try the watch on my wrist. It's just been sitting here for maybe 4 or 5 days and I've just been handling it around until I can wear it. This is a perfect homage with the newer movement. A bit better. I'm not saying that those movements are the best. I'm gonna say the 8L35 is the best movement of the lineup, but those are using the 6L55, the 6L35 for the older models, and they're all very good. But they did have some little problems of accuracy, and you have to be careful the ones you're buying, if they're still under warranty or not, but they still remain very sturdy watches. I do have a lot of love for those 40.5 millimeter cases. They are easy to wear. They fit smaller wrists like mine, and they are just perfect from the lug to lug on the top. They're not using a lot of space on the wrist, and you can wear them as a tool watch if you're traveling, and that's why I always bought them. They're a bit high in terms of the height, but they wear very well. Why do I have three of them? I have the black PVD, The black lineup, those are limited. I have the green one here showing you the diver's perspective from the bottom of the sea all the way up with the waves on the dial. I just found that the design is so exceptionally well done, and if you're looking to buy a watch which has similar dials or similar colorways, you're going to spend a lot more money than what this watch is worth retail. These ones, I think this one is $2,300 Canadian, which translates to maybe $1,699 or $1,700 US, and they are pretty affordable for what they are. They're also coming with a new bracelet which is adjustable on the fly, and I just can't wait to try it. It's really, really nice. I also have the classic 62 MAS, the SPB 143, which is the brown dial 62 MAS re-edition. Super cool watch as well, and it also comes with a brown style NATO, and for the price you're getting something really good. They constantly raise their prices. I believe that the black ones, you can get them for under 1,000 Canadian, so under $700 US. And if you're looking for the SPB 143, something a bit similar. So they did remain for a very long time in the same price range, but now they went up by about $700 or $800 Canadian, which translates for about $500 US. It's quite a bit of a jump. I do understand that the $2,000 threshold is a pretty steep change, and if you're looking at the Swiss industry right now, comparing to 5-10 years ago, the prices have almost doubled. So Seiko still remains somewhat affordable in this luxury world, and that's why I think that they're really good. Don't forget that Seiko is sitting for a while, and a lot of shops might give you a bit of a discount, maybe 10, 20, 30%. I don't know, you might be lucky, or you might have a very good relation with your dealer, and you might get a pretty good deal out there. I got mine from Atelier Lou. They are in Westmount. They are Seiko retailers, and if you call Eric, he might give you a bit of a discount or whatnot. He's really, really good. Again, those watches are interesting by their quality, interesting by the fact that no one really pays attention to them. If you're traveling, you don't want to drive any attention towards you, and this is why the 62 MAS for me is something different. It looks like a $200 watch, and a lot of thieves, there are a lot of people who don't know about watches. They're not going to think about stealing your $200 watch, which might be worth 10 times that in today's market, just because they don't know. And a lot of people attribute Seiko to a cheap watch, so this is the ultimate low-key travel watch for me. When we're comparing the 62 MAS, I do find that the Marine Master is also a very good contender. I have one here, and this one has the 6L35 movement as well. I believe it was also somewhere around the $1,400. It's in the same lineup with the 62 MAS. Almost the same proportions. The only difference is that we have the crown at 4 o'clock, and we do have here the same movement, all the same idea, same type of bezel, except the case, which is a bit more organic. It's a bit more round. It almost hugs your wrist, and it does feel quite as good. It does wear a bit bigger, and the only reason I don't have the tuna is because I find them really humongous. So they made 3 of them. They made the Marine Master, they made the 62 MAS, and the tuna, but the tuna is just too big for me, so I can't just wear it. I just don't like it on my wrist, and I always like the idea of having those low-key sports watches in my collection. I always had the idea of owning some PVD watches, and I think that those are incarnating or representing what I always liked about Seiko, something low-key, something that no one really has. And since they're limited edition to, I think, 6,000 pieces, you can still find them in Japan, you can find them a bit everywhere, and they're readily available for, as I said, under 1,000 US. And if you want them used, you can find them under 750 US, and I think they're a bargain in the market. The one watch that will be available on the website, and I do have a lot of problems finding them more and more, it's the Captain Willard. It's really hard to find a watch that's very honest, that has been worn, that's still unpolished, that still bears all the marks and all the original parts. In this case, we have a watch that is dated at the back by the original owner in 1978, and we have his name on the back. I'm gonna keep it like that. I like the idea of a watch that was worn and that was cherished for almost 50 years now. It's 1978, so we're just a few years away from calling it, almost antique or whatever we might call it after 50 years. But it's a really cool vintage watch, and I find that if you can try one on the wrist, if it does fit you, it might be your daily wear, especially if you want to wear it for anything out there. They're perfect, sturdy, and those movements just never ever give up. The 6105-8110 is one of those watches that is very hard to get right now because we cannot find original bezels, or if we do, it's a few $100s or more. So it becomes a harder watch to find in oral original state. And this one is just cool. I've put a Tropic band on it that's brand new, a sub 18 millimeter strap from, I believe, the 1970s or the early 80s, and it will be on the website very soon. But this is what Seiko is all about. They did create so many different models. They do have a huge heritage, and they were offering quality pieces that resisted time and resisted everything that you would throw at them for decades. Obviously, if you run over them with a tank or whatever it might be, you're still going to destroy it like any other watch. But I find that out of all the watches that I acquired over the years, Seiko's watches are the most likely to still work, to still be 100% serviceable, and to be nowadays a bit more collectible than they ever were. Why I don't have a lot of them is it's just harder and harder to find them. There are so many collectors that are looking for them, and before they get to me, a lot of collectors have already snagged them for their own personal use or to resell on their side. And it's becoming harder to do that with those watches because they're still in the affordable realm of under $2,000 Canadian or $1,500 US when we're looking on the market. Also, what you have to understand is that a lot of those Seikos, I'd like to have them on hand, but they're very expensive to service. Watchmakers are getting more and more expensive to work with. And when we're getting to those entry-level watches, sub $1,000, sub $2,000 in the luxury world, we're kind of hitting a snag. I have to buy the watch, I have to service it, which might be $300-400 in most cases, and then we have to market it and put it on the website, and it becomes very, very hard to even make a few $100s if you factor in the costs of owning a business, the costs of taking the time to list those watches, repairing them or prepping them, installing a rubber band that's new old stock, and even those are starting to get quite expensive. Therefore, even before it hits the website, I still have to put $300-400-500 into the watch before it hits the website. And this is why a lot of those Seikos do not end up in my hands, because I have to pay them low enough where I can bring them back to life and you can enjoy them for the next 10, 15, 20 years or more. And it's just not feasible with a market that's so tight. But nonetheless, I do love those watches very much. I do enjoy them, and I'm gonna tell you why I really, really like them. Why do I like them? First of all, I repeated myself in the video, I do like them for travel. They're really, really easy to wear without caring too much about anyone around being dangerous or wanting to put you or your kids in danger for a stupid watch. It makes no sense to go that route. Seiko is that one company that offers that choice of good watches without having to spend a lot and without having to risk your life while you're wearing your quality watch. There are so many other watches out there as well, and those are in the mid-tier of Seiko, or on the higher end. You can find some watches at $300-500 that are just doing the same job and are looking just as good or very close to those models. It's only that I really like enjoying a bit more of the higher end lineup of Seiko, but you can find even cheaper models that are just gonna do the same. I know people that have enjoyed Seikos for 20, 25 years without ever servicing them, and they lived with them all over the world, and they had a very good service given by that company. What's cool about Seikos, they do age very well. I find that a lot of those watches are so interesting when they age, and you have a really cool faded bezel as much as you would have on a Rolex or any other vintage watch. They also can be worn daily. As I said, we have seen, my friends and I, people that have been wearing those watches for maybe 20, 30 years without ever servicing the watch, or maybe one or two services, which is very minimal, very little interaction with the watchmaker. And they're still ticking, they're still working very well. Some watchmakers out there can repair those watches for very little money. I'm not saying that this is the case. As I said, maybe in Montreal with my watchmakers, they're a lot more expensive to work with, but you might find a watchmaker that will fix it for maybe under $100, and you still have a ticking watch for the next 5-10 years. This is why it's a perfect daily watch as well. If you're going for the higher end models, you might have a bit of trouble finding parts, because as any other company, you might have to send them to Seiko themselves. But I think that they're still gonna last for many, many decades to come. And it's one of those watches that has nothing to envy to the higher end brands. The value of those watches is tremendously impressive, because if you compare it to the Swiss alternatives, you're getting maybe 70, 80, 90% of what the Swiss watch industry offers for about 20, 25, 30% of the price. And this is what Seiko is all about. There's no fluff, it's only quality. You have to understand that Seikos are never going to replace your high-end luxury collection, especially if you enjoy something a bit more high-end. But nonetheless, you have something of great quality, good price, and the reputation is backed by over 60 years of hard work and experience creating those watches and putting them out in public. A lot of those watches have, again, a lot of wear, a lot of tear from people that have enjoyed them for many years and not even caring about them, because they were a lot more affordable back then. And today we see that resurgence and that appreciation of what the company was and what is and has become today. If you have been ignoring Seiko or Grand Seiko for many years, and you actually snobbed them or half snobbed them, whatever people might call it, is a bit of your loss, because you need to have one in your collection. You need to have one on your wrist. You need to live with it for a while, and you'll understand why and how they are. You will appreciate them for the quality and for the brand itself altogether. And this is why Seiko has been there. This is why hardcore collectors love them and they understand them, and they collect a lot of Seikos. I know people that have hundreds of Seikos in their collections, and this is why they really enjoy them, because Seiko has always given the best for the least price out there. I want to hear your diving stories with those Seikos and your experience overall with the brand. If you do have something to say, good or bad about it, I want to hear it. I want to know all about it in the comments. If you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Thank you guys. Hi there. Before you take off, I just want to take a second and say that I really appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. I am so grateful for this incredible watch community, so thank you for being part of it. If you want to help the channel continue to grow, one of the easiest things you can do is leave a like on this video and consider subscribing.